Hey guys, Enrique here again, and today, we're gonna be looking at how to get the cinematic film look through color grading in After Effects. And now, let's get started. First, drag your clip into the timeline. Make a new adjustment layer. I'll rename it into color grading. Put it on top of the clip. Next, go to the window, and open Lumetri Scopes, right-click on the color workspace, and enable the RGB parade, and the waveform by selecting the parade RGB twice. These scopes may look intimidating and complicated at first, but trust me, they are not really complicated. There are two reasons why these scopes are very important. 1. Using the scopes provides you the accurate color representation of the video, because your monitor might not be calibrated and the color display might not accurately reflect the true color of the video. 2. Scopes are important to your workflow since your eyes are not always reliable, and that's because the lighting in the editor's environment affects how they see colors. The waveform enables exposure correction. It shows the video's exposure on a scale from 0 to 100, with 0 representing the blacks and 100 representing the whites. You don't want your exposure to go beyond these numbers because it means you'll lose some details. The RGB parade scope helps us fix the white balance issue. With this scope, it is easier to spot imbalances whether the image is too cool or too warm. One channel will be elevated over the others as a result. To achieve cinematic color grading, these are the procedures that I follow. 1. First step is RGB curves adjustment. Now, let's correct the exposure of this image using the curves adjustment. To use the curves adjustment panel, select the color grading layer, go to the effects panel, and search for the Lumetri color effect. Apply the effect to the color grading layer by dragging it onto the layer in the composition panel. Click on the Curves tab. To access the Curves adjustment panel, Curves gonna help you change the contrast of your video, how dark and how light it is. As you can see here, we have RGB curves. We have white dot, red, green and blue dot. The red, green and blue dots allow you to change the contrast for these individual colors, but we want to change all the contrast for all the colors for this clip. So we're gonna select the white dot. As you can see, there's a diagonal line here. And the way this line works, is that it lets you change the contrast in darker and lighter parts of the video clip. Going down here is your shadows, in the middle part is your midtones, and at the top is your highlights. Let's go in our midtones in the middle part. Let's click here and a little point appears, and I am gonna start to drag this point up. While watching the waveform, as you'll see the image is getting brighter. Now let's go down here in the shadows, and I am gonna click again, and drag it down until the darkest parts of the image sits right above 0. As you'll see, the midtones are still brighter, and the shadows are getting darker. And now, let's go up here to our highlights. I am gonna click again and make another point. Then we'll bring up the highlights by dragging it up until the brightest part of the image sits right about near below 100. If I bring the highlights way beyond the 100 level, you're gonna see that we're starting to overexpose the bright areas of the image, and start to lose some details. So I am gonna pull this down a bit, and now, this is our before, and this is after. Second step is basic correction. I use basic correction at the end of the color grading process. This is to make some little refinement and tweaks and to make the image pop. Under basic correction, let's go over here and we'll fix the color temperature. Since the image is looking warm, if you look into the RGB parade scope, red traces elevated above the blue and green. Our objective here is to make these colors in line with one another. To do that, click on the basic correction tab to access the white balance. You can adjust the temperature and tint slider manually or use the auto white balance selector. To do that, you just have to select the eyedropper tool, and click on the white part of the image and boom. The temperature and tint sliders automatically adjust to balance the white of the image, and the RGB traces are now aligned in the RGB parade scope. Third step is adjustment of saturation. For the next step, let's boost the color a little bit by dragging the saturation slider to the right. I think 130 is enough. And now, let's preview our clip. Here's the before and after. For our final step, we need to push teal into the overall image, but without affecting the skin tones. So let me show you how we can do this. Now, let's open the HSL secondary panel. Key. Then HSL sliders. And use the eyedropper to select our subject's skin. Next, play around with the hue, saturation and luma sliders to refine our selection of the skin. Then add some feather by increasing the denoise and blur. Since we now have our skin tone selected, next, invert our selection. And now we can use the color wheel to add teal color into the image without affecting the skin tones. You can actually add any colors into the background, but it'll make the background color teal. And now, let's preview our clip. Here's the before and after. As you can see, we now have our teal color in our background, but the problem is, our shadow also looks teal. What we want is to have clean black shadows. To do that, go to the curves panel. Then go to the Luma versus Sat curve. In this line, the shadows are to the left and the highlights are to the right. Pulling up the line increases the saturation while pulling it down decreases saturation. Since we want to decrease the shadow's teal color saturation, we will place a point here in the shadow area. And then we'll drag the left point all the way down to reduce shadow's saturation. Here's the before and after. For the next clip, just repeat the same procedures, and that's it. You now have a cinematic video by just applying a color grade. That's all for this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys find this tutorial helpful. Please subscribe if you like this video or thumbs up. See you on the next video.